How can you expect someone to do something for you that they're not willing to do for themselves? Or better yet, how can you expect someone to do something for you that you're not willing to do for yourself? Hey, my beloved family. It is me again, your host, Ron Natalia, here to welcome you to another episode of the Fear Nothing, Feel Everything podcast, where I do my best to foster a safe space for you and your blossoming authenticity. I hope that you've been journeying in love and grace since the last time, and without further ado, let's get into it. So, the idea for today's episode came from two stories that I was told in the same week around the same topic, which is expecting people to do something for you that you yourself cannot do for yourself or do not do for yourself. I think that it's very important to recognize the amount of weight or responsibility that we give other people when it comes to making us feel loved, safe, protected, and so forth, or seen and heard, without even giving that to ourselves in a lot of situations. And I spoke on this more in a previous episode of the podcast, episode 4, where I talk about your partner as a complement and not a supplement, because it speaks more on how when you seek people to bring into your life, and this can be friends, people that you associate with, and even your partner or your lover, you want to make sure that they are a complement to your life and not something that you need. When we talk about supplements, we're talking about things that we take to fill a gap in our diet. Something that's filling in a gap, that's a quick fix that makes it easier and more accessible to us. However, when something is a complement, we don't need it. However, it's nice that it's there. So, episode 4, your partner as a complement and not a supplement, definitely expand on this a little bit more. However, I'm going to go ahead and tell you two stories and just pose two questions that I think is really important when it comes to understanding what we can do for ourselves and alleviating the disappointment that comes when we place a lot of that expectation on other people and that responsibility on other people. So in this first story, there's going to be 4 characters, and essentially the main character is going to be my sister. She's not my biological sister. She's actually been my best friend since kindergarten, and it's just easier for me to call her my sister. She's my soul sister. So that is our main character. And just a little backstory on my sister. She's a very kind soul, very sweet, very bubbly character, and she has been very soft and cute all throughout life. And I have no better words to describe her as opposed to loving, bubbly, soft, cute, energetic, very much like the essence of childhood embodied in a human being, that you just all of the good parts of childhood in a person. And so because of this personality, she has faced a lot of hardship in her life, because there are people that see that and they come to manipulate or destroy. And when I say destroy, like take advantage of that kindness, take advantage of that softness, and push her towards like a hardened self, a disillusioned self, a jaded self. And so now that she is coming into her own again and reconnecting with herself and rediscovering how worthy she is of love and kindness and is feeling more empowered, she's kind of still in a situation that was made by her old self, which is a self that would take people's mistreatment and kind of shift around in that victim mentality of, oh, why is everything happening to me? There's nothing I can do about this. This is just the cards I've been dealt kind of thing. And so as she's been feeling more empowered and doing a lot of things to pull herself out of these situations that her old self has gotten her into, it's still kind of like the more she grows and the more she develops and the more she comes into her own, the easier it's going to be to shift into situations that feel more aligned and nurturing for her. So it's like our old self digs us into this hole endlessly, and then as we grow and we develop, it is the skills that our new self acquires that gets us out of that hole. And then the antagonist of this story is a young woman that she works with that at this moment in her life is young but very mean-spirited. And I think because she's been treated a certain way throughout her entire life, she sees it okay to treat people in this way, and she projects a lot of her beliefs and a lot of what she's seen as treatment towards her onto others, making it an excuse for her to behave in the way that she behaves. And so she's basically the office bully. She's this kind of young woman that gets whatever she wants, regardless of how it makes people feel, regardless of the consequences it might have on other people. And she just makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. And I know you might be saying, oh, why don't they report her to the boss? Apparently the boss is someone that wants to be friends with everyone. And because this young woman is very good looking and he's an older man, he appreciates the attention of younger women, and therefore he doesn't want to be put into this young woman's bad graces. And then the last character of the story is a young man that works with my sister that is also suffering underneath the tyranny of this young woman. So essentially, this story takes place in their break room. And this young woman comes up to the young man and she says, "Give me your charger." And the young man, because when people want something from you and it's your own belongings, says, "Say please." He's like, "Please be courteous towards me. Say please if you want to have my charger." And for some reason, this sends this young woman into a spiral of attacking him. And she says, "Oh, don't be soft. You're supposed to be a man. When someone asks you for something, you're not always gonna get what you want out of life. And asking someone to say please just shows how soft you are." And basically berating him and telling him that life is not whatever he wants. It's not rainbows and sunshines. When people ask him for stuff, he's not always gonna get what he wants in return, and all of these things. And she demeans him and she insults him and berates him, and he just stands there and he takes it. And as the situation is happening, my sister's watching it unfold, and she's having some feelings and emotions develop within her, but she remains silent. And when this young woman's done literally demoralizing this young man, he silently hands over his charger. She takes it, doesn't even say thank you, and goes off to use it. And this young man then goes over to a table, and in his silence, he lays his head on the table and covers his face. And my sister says she doesn't know if he was crying or if he was just taking a moment for himself, but the inner turmoil that she was experiencing was she wanted to say something. She felt as if she should have said something. However, when that urge to say something had come up, she immediately remembered, or a voice immediately said to her, that when this young woman was bullying me, when this young woman was berating me every day and saying mean things to me, no one else stood up for me. This guy didn't stand up for me. And that is what stopped her from speaking up against this young woman in this moment. And the way that it turns out is that as my sister's been growing and standing up for herself more, this, a lot of the things that this young woman used to say to get to her and to get on her doesn't get to her anymore. And this young woman has been noticing that her negativity and her meanness isn't having an effect on my sister like it once used to. So apparently she's now spreading it out into other people in the office, especially people that aren't her friends. So there's a very mean girls vibe going on in their workplace. But all this to say, when she said this to me, when she said he never stood up for me, so I didn't feel the need to stand up for him, or even though I wanted to stand up for him, I was stopped by the fact that he never stood up for me. He never said anything when I was being bullied. He just allowed it to happen. And my question to her was, how could you expect someone that clearly cannot defend themselves to defend you in that moment? All of the times that you were looking for him to say something when you were being berated, when you were looking for him to stand up for you, you can clearly see now that it was misplaced trust, misplaced responsibility, misplaced expectations, because this young man was literally berated, demoralized, and demeaned in front of you for however long. And instead of setting boundaries, defending himself, and telling this young woman no, he validated her behavior by giving her what she wanted from him, and then went to cry because he couldn't say to her, like, I am worth more than this. You're not allowed to speak to me this way. And I think it's very important, one, to not place that expectation or responsibility in other people when we don't even understand the depths of what they're willing to do for themselves. And two, not allowing past experiences, hurt, pain, determine who we are or take us out of being the person that we want to be. Because in this moment, her higher self, the healed part of her, the part of her that knew better and that wanted better for everyone, said, I should say something to this girl. What she's doing is not right. However, the ego, the wound, was saying, he never stood up for me, so he deserves this. He never stood up for me, so why would I put myself in harm's way? And I just want to say, never let your hurt, your pain, your wounds, or your fear determine whether or not you're going to stand in the version of yourself that you want to be. As you heal, there's going to be two sides that are pulling you. There's going to be the side of you that perpetuates the pattern, and then the side of you that breaks the pattern. And the more strength you have in breaking the pattern, the more aligned action that you take in embodying the person that you want to be, embodying the traits of your higher self, the easier it becomes to move in alignment, to live in alignment. And it's small things like this that will test how healed you are, how much you've grown, how much you've developed since having that experience. And so I just offered her that perspective, and she was like, you're right. I allowed the fact that I was hurt from this situation determine whether or not I could have been the change I wanted to see, whether or not I could have been the person that I needed for someone else. Because that's another thing. Like, sometimes the test of whether or not you are capable of being who you need can sometimes show up as you embodying that version of yourself in a situation that's got nothing to do with you. But it's like, are you that person regardless? Even when it's not surrounding you, are you that person? And then the second story that I have that was based around this is involving my little brother. I have two little brothers, but one has a bit more social interactions than others. And this story was so similar and had a very similar through line. And so I just wanted to share with you guys as well. My little brother and my other, so I have two brothers, and they both went to a football game. And it was a homecoming game, and apparently when you're seated close to the front, or when you're in the front rows, you get to stand up. So because everyone's standing up, more people can fit in the space than if they were sitting down. And so they're all there with their friends, they're standing up, they're cheering on their team. Then halftime comes around, and three of them go to the bathroom, to the concession, and so forth. So my little brothers and their friend go off to the bathroom and the concession. And when halftime is over and they return to go sit in their seats, there's a young girl there, and she says, oh, you can't sit here anymore. And she's like sitting, she's sprawled out, and she's not going to sit the entire game, but she's sitting in a way where she doesn't want them to stand there. And my brother's like, okay, fine, when everyone stands up again, we'll just be able to get in because she'll stand up. And time comes to stand, the game starts up again. She doesn't get up. She's looking at them, glaring at them, saying, you can't sit here. And so my brother's like, what do you mean we can't sit there? And so it becomes a scene, a small scene, where she's telling these three people they're not allowed to come back in, and everyone else that's there is watching as she's like rejecting them from the group. And my brother said in this moment he was so upset because, first of all, it wasn't a problem to begin with, but during the first half of the game, when he was standing there, he was making sure everyone had water, he was making sure they had snacks, he was like passing things around, making sure everyone was all good, and he was looking out for everyone in a way that he thought him being seated there would be valuable to the people that he was sitting with. But when the time came and he was getting kicked out, no one said anything. No one was standing up for him. No one was like, oh, he's the guy that was making sure I got my water. Like, let him sit here. Like, why are you being like this? And he was so frustrated because he's like, why, when I did all these stuff for them, when it came time to get my space back, nobody stood up for me. Nobody advocated for me to be there. When I thought that me being there was not only valuable to me, but to them. And as he was saying this, all I could think to myself was, okay, I get it. It's valid. It's hard to do so much for other people, and when the time comes for them to do for you, you get nothing in return. But at the same time, I asked him, but why didn't you stand up for yourself? There were 3 of you and 1 of her. Why didn't you just go anyway? And I know my brother is very non-confrontational. He doesn't like to argue, and he doesn't like physical altercation. So when it came down to it, they said that the game was horrible anyway, so they decided to just leave. But as they were leaving, he couldn't get over how upset he was. Like, he wanted to go say something. He wanted to go do something. But the fact that nobody said anything just made him feel all the more out of place for saying something. And so he just allowed it to ruminate, and he was pissed off, and they just went and got something to eat and left the game. Which brings me to my second point. Never, and I know a lot of people say never, but don't do things with the expectation that you will get something in return. Don't do things with the expectation that it'll make you valuable to someone else. Do the things that you want to do because you want to do them. Do the things that you want to do because they align with who you are as a person. Because when you do those things because you want to do them and because they align with you as a person, even if no one else sees the value in it, even if no one advocates for you to do it, it is still valuable to you because it's intrinsic to you. Yes, it might be hurtful that other people don't see the value in it, or they don't see the need to defend it, but that's why it's not for them, it's for you. And again, the responsibility that we place on other people to validate us, to respect us, to be responsible for our feelings, to make sure that we get what we need is misplaced, because that's our responsibility. We are our own responsibility, especially when we get to a certain age and we begin to develop and have these social interactions. We are responsible for how we allow other people to make us feel. We are responsible for the boundaries that we set. We are responsible for the situations that we allow ourselves to be in. Then we choose. We get to choose, does this get to continue? Am I okay with walking away from this? Am I going to ruminate on this if I walk away from this? What does it mean for me to stay here and stand my ground as opposed to walking away from this? And as I had a conversation with my brother about this, he said that his main thing that he was upset about was that he didn't say anything, because he wanted to say something for himself. He wanted to defend himself, and it ate him up inside that he did not stand up for himself and give himself what he needed. He said that even though it's hard for him now to look back on it, he says what he does know is that the next time that it comes to a situation where he needs to defend himself and nobody says anything, even if nobody says anything, even if someone says something, he knows that he doesn't want to feel this way again, so he's gonna say what he has to say and stand his ground. Because feeling this way, feeling disrespected, feeling violated, feeling not valued is so much worse than what would have come with the standing up for himself and saying, no, I get to stay here, I belong here, I am entitled to be here just as much as anyone else. And so, yeah, I hope that part of this episode resonated with you, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I know it was a bit story heavy, but just giving 2 examples of just 2 situations that were quite similar in the energetic around it, but showing how the ways in which we respond and the ways in which we allow ourselves to not mitigate responsibility, but delegate responsibility for ourselves onto other people can leave us in situations where we're not satisfied with the outcome. And then we're also not satisfied with who we become when we're delegating that responsibility, because now we don't align with our highest self and we don't allow ourselves to embody the version of ourselves that we know we can truly be. I hope that you guys continue to journey in love and grace, and until next time, remember that you are loved by God, the universe, all your ancestors and guides, and me. And until next time, bye.